Hello, hello, it's Heyde here, and I am very excited to be taking a special exclusive look into raw strings. So this was a library that was sent to me by BJ Durgance, and he reached out with this library in mind, hoping that I would check it out, and it is really cool. Really cool. I've never seen a library quite like this, so I'm gonna do my best to dig into what it actually does and some of the effects you can achieve. But before I get into the cue itself, let's just take a look at the interface and what this thing actually is. So it's called Raw Strings, and it's really much more than just strings. I found that this library is exceptional when it comes to creating textures and computer-generated kind of effects, arpeggiations. It is just chock full of so many different samples, so many different effects on those samples, and lots of different random parameters or user-generated parameters. You can really get a lot of different sounds out of this one thing. So if you take a look at this initial interface, we've got kind of 4 identical layouts here. Within each of those, if I click, I get access to all of the different patch options. So we can kind of layer or mute or solo any of these 4. And that's really useful because that gives us a lot of possibilities. So going to the opening, we've got a bunch of standard sounds. Now these are the ones that are just recorded normally. We also have duplicates of these with different sorts of effects on it, mostly tape effects, but we also have some reverses, and we have a reverse with tape. So I'm just gonna go ahead and play some of these so you can hear what this library has got in it. So here's just vibrato close. The sound of this library is very much about like chamber strings. So we've got vibrato far now, bit distant miking, raw close, raw far. We've got flautandos. We've got tremolo pizzicatos. This one's cool. Finger tremolos. It's a good one. Wispy tremolos. We've got octave shifts. So here. I use this one quite a bit. Staggered swell. We've got harmonics. Split harmonics for an even thinner sound. And then we've got bow clicks, noises. And then over here in some of these other sections, we're also gonna have things like, let's see where it is, the petrichor. It's a nice like ambient, tapey kind of pad. Oblique strategy, somewhat similar. I believe these are based off of the original samples. So these are the initial options we get here, and that's a lot in itself because we can combine them in any possibilities. Like, let's take the wispy tremolo, let's turn these guys on. So we click the numbers to turn them on. Yeah, we'll keep flautando, we'll keep reverie, sure, let's keep that, and let's put in octave shifts. Okay, so now we have all of these in combination. Now we can change a lot of parameters with each of them. So here we've got volume for each of them. We've got our pan, we've got cutoff, and we've got tunings. So let's just play with these one by one. All right, so you see already we're getting some options here. So really cool, already we've got some great effects going on here. Within this UI, we've got a bunch more stuff. So let's go through it one by one. We've got an arpeggiator and a sequencer in the first window. So that will control whatever layers we select for each of these, and we can create a bunch of different sets that will affect different layers. So for example, let's say we want to affect just layers 1 and 2. We could have that, and as long as we have this turned on, we'll be affecting that. So you can hear those are being affected. We could change our length of these sounds, so. And because these are kind of longer samples, I probably want full length, or at least a little bit shorter. And we can maybe do something like this. Okay, so that's something. Now let's go to the other one. Now let's affect layers, let's see, we did 1 and 2 here. So let's only affect layers 3 and 4 here. And let's do the opposite. So where it was going quiet, now it's going loud. And once again, we're gonna kind of lower this a little bit. And let's see what kind of effect we get here. So now they're alternating against each other. Now let's say we were actually doing this, we wanted to use this. We kind of have a bit of a problem, right? In that the samples aren't really being triggered at the right time. Well, that's where we can go into our next window, which has the wrench icon, and that's gonna affect attack, decay, sustain, and release for each of these. That's really useful. We can also affect offset and timbre, which is what we're gonna do. So all these samples, they're a bit late, which is natural. So we'll push this offset forward a little bit so the samples get triggered a little bit later. And we're gonna do this for all 4 layers. Now they're right on the beat, but we get that pop because it's in the middle of the sample. That's where we go to the attack and we'd bump this up. So this is gonna soften the attack a little bit. Now, we can even do things, let's say we want it to be more percussive. Okay, so now I've adjusted those parameters the way that I want them, where it sounds like this. Okay, now if we go back to our arpeggiator, you're gonna hear that it's a bit more synchronized. So right in there, there's a bunch of possibilities already. Okay, so now let's move on to the next section, which is the effects. So here we've got a bunch of great built-in effects: delays, reverbs, choral effects, transistors, limiters, filters, compression. So in here, there's a bunch of really nice ones. I love the vintage delay. I think that's really cool. Okay, now let's put on a convolution reverb. This one's nice. And maybe a filter as well. Now that gives us even more effects. We can even add a sequencer to this. So let's have the sequencer control our volume so we get a nice little swell over the course of 16. So you see we're getting lots of options here. Now let's go to our last one here, and that's gonna control attack, decay, and sustain and release of all of them. So it's like, oh, we want even more of an attack? Instead of going and adjusting them each one by one inside our gear icon, we can actually do that right here. That's where we can get those extra effects. So you might be thinking, this is a ton of possibilities. I don't even know where I'd start with something like this. And the good news is there's 2 great features that are built into this software that I use the most. There's the snapshots. So if we look in here, we've actually got a ton of different pre-established tones. And I love all of them. I actually use quite a few of them in my queue. Memento Mori was one of my favorites. Really liked that one. I also really like Floating in Space. I think it gives kind of a Thomas Newman-y vibe. So I just love that it oscillates through everything. Another one that I really liked was the Air Chrysalis. This one is just very big and expansive. And my other favorite was the Winter Hymnal, which formed the basis of the melodic material in my piece. Super delicate, really, really delicate and thin. And then the other feature that we have other than snapshots, if you're looking for sounds, is this little die here, which is the Randomize button. So if we click this, we get a whole random set of parameters, which get some really cool, really interesting effects. I'll press it again. And if we turn on our other 2 here, we're gonna get even more options because it's gonna flip through all of them. So you can hear there's a ton of options in this thing, both user-generated and randomly generated, which is great. Now let's take a look at how I use this in the actual queue. So most of the tracks in this queue were presets that I kind of tweaked from there. So let's take a look at some of the opening ones. We've got this thing I called Constant Pad, and we've got the String Pulse. And these kind of make up the basis of the queue. So one is just the split harmonics. And then one here has a sequencer built in, and the arpeggiator. So when those were in place, I added in the Newman Oscillation that I liked, which is called Floating in Space, on left and right. Now I usually play with these things with expression, so I'll use things, MIDI expression or volume, just to ride the volume knob up and down in these things. I did that here with this 5th sequencer, which is very subtle. You won't even hear it until the end. We've also got string plucking. And then we're going to introduce a larger pad here that is based out of the Memento Mori that I was talking about. And then at the very end of the cue, we're going to introduce string tremolos, very bright, reverberant. There they come. And then there's a big cut at the end that I automated just for extra effect. You'll see they're all automated down. So those are the basic pads in this cue. Now let's take a look at some of the more melodic material. So like I said, the melodic material started off with the upper harmonics, which was from the Winter Hymnal patch that I liked. And I adjusted the offset so that the samples would start right on the beat. You'll see I did that over here. Now to accompany that, I added in some lower strings, just almost more natural sounding, a little bit in a hall reverb. With some subtle vibrato. Then to change the texture about halfway through the piece, I decided to introduce the piano, which is their rehearsal piano in here. Really like that, and added some reverse effects as well, just to give some extra texture. Here it comes now. Little EQ to get rid of some of the bass end. And then with the pads, that gave a very full sounding effect. Okay, so the piece was almost done at that point. The last thing I wanted to add was some more deep, bassy elements. And I accomplished that again with the Memento Mori, which has some really nice sub-like elements here. You'll hear that. And to give that a little bit extended tail, I added in a delay, so you hear it goes boom, 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 boom. To accompany that, I added what I just called mid-bass, which was also Memento Mori, but with a little bit of the bass EQ scooped out. I love the texture of this one. Here's everything together. And there you have it. That's how I go about writing my cues. I like to look for different textural elements. I find that I like to work with ambient music in a very visceral, tactile way, and a library like this accomplishes just that. It has so many different effects that you can tweak. It has so many different built-in effects within the samples themselves. Arpeggiation sequencers, I just found it absolutely packed and really inspiring. I'm very excited to use this on future projects. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks again to BJ for sending this library my way. I'll leave links when they're available in the description box, so be sure to check that out. And I'll see you in the next video.